Hi, everyone. This is Nate Trueblood sitting in for Steve Paris. Our guest today is Dr. Patty Malone. Patty has more than 25 years of experience in the field of communication as a corporate trainer, speaker, author, and TV news anchor. She's won numerous awards for her news, sales, corporate, and academic achievements. We're going to talk with her a little bit today about the importance of communication and how it applies to our own success, as well as how it ties into the law of success, which most of our listeners have read. So I want to get to the laws in a minute and how they sort of apply to you personally, and and what you found and how they apply in business. But I'm curious about communication. You said that all the things that you've done in your career have been linked to it, and I wonder why that's an underlying theme. So what draws you to that? Why do you think it's such an important part of business?
Well, for one thing, I think communication is frequently misunderstood, the importance of it. I think a lot of people look at communication as kind of a luxury training or a luxury item or something that they can just deal with themselves, and not really realizing the depth of importance of communication, how everything is created by and revolves around and is expressed through communication. So, for example, people frequently refer to communication as soft skills, like soft skills training. I don't see it that way at all. I see communication as the most important and necessary ingredient, and frequently unrecognized, in terms of increasing productivity, profitability, and really helping companies achieve their bottom line, especially in today's business market of having to do more, better, faster, with less resources. Communication is of primary importance, and I feel like a lot of people fail to recognize that. And that's sort of been a theme that's run through everything. It started out that I felt like I wanted to be involved in TV news and help people with information, give them information, and I started out with that, and it just seems like each career has evolved into the next one, and each one has set me up for the next one. So it's like been an evolving process, but it's always revolved around communication. And another thing about that, I feel like the conversation about communication needs to be transformed in companies and corporations, and also the importance of communication within that needs to be transformed. Not only the way we talk about communication, but the way we actually communicate. A lot of times in companies, people just do bottom line communication, and they do things in forms of orders, and they're not really thinking about the impact the way they communicate has. And there's also a lot of miscommunication, a lot of communication breakdowns, a lot of communication failures, and it ends up costing companies millions and millions of dollars. In fact, my favorite example of miscommunication is NASA ended up spending $300 million too much on the Mars probe because one team measured in inches and the other in centimeters. And they didn't communicate about that.
Well, it doesn't sound very efficient.
No, and a lot of companies do that. That's kind of a big example, but it happens daily in small interactions, email, face-to-face, as well as on major projects like that.
That makes me curious as to what you think would be maybe the one or two things that lead to most communication breakdowns in business.
I think the biggest problem is people don't listen. People are in their heads thinking about what they're going to say, or they're in their heads thinking about the laundry list of what they have to do the next day. They start tuning out if they're not interested in what somebody has to say, or if they don't understand what somebody has to say. The key is to really listen to people and then also check to make sure they understand. There's this assumption that we make. We communicate with somebody, we explain something to someone, how to do something or a new policy, and we communicate and we assume they get it and we walk away. Well, that person didn't get it at all. And we don't even realize it until they're not performing their job correctly. Things start falling apart. So it's really important for us to take responsibility for our communication on both sides of the equation. If we're explaining something to somebody, giving them directions, we need to check and make sure that they understood us by asking questions. And the same thing the other way around. If we're the ones who are receiving information, because we do the same thing. We listen, we think we get it, they leave. Then we start trying to do what they told us to do and realize halfway in the middle that we don't completely understand it. So we need to ask questions as well and really listen to check for understanding. So that's a big thing.
All right, so I want to shift back to the law of success for a minute because I think we have a good baseline for talking about communication in business. But first, I wanted to ask, did you know about the book before we had sent it to you, and what did you think of the book?
Actually, I had not read it before. I did read Think and Grow Rich, and I was well aware of Napoleon Hill, even though I had not read all of his other books. So when she called, I was really excited to get the book, and I did. I read the entire book, and it's amazing that it was written like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago, and the principles have not changed. I mean, they're as equally valuable and valid today as they were then. And another thing with that book, it's kind of funny. Since I've read it, I listened to a lot of different interviews on the radio and online, and it's amazing how many top business people and how many multimillionaires refer back to that book. They really use that book as the basis for being successful in their lives and in their businesses. And that's really been showing up to me since I read it, because I'm very excited about it, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting. We look at a lot of different, people when they refer to it. Sometimes they refer specifically to the book, but other times they'll refer to something that's laid out in the book in a way that seems as if they've read the book, but maybe have never come in contact with it. But they're basically stating what's exactly in the book, and we find that there's a huge correlation between people that have all kinds of levels of success, whether you want to say someone is a modest success or whether you want to say they're, like Warren Buffett or, somebody really big like that. The same principles apply. And this is part of what this interview series is all about. We try to find the correlations, for people in all different fields and all different walks of life. So when you were reading the book, did you make some connections of your own between certain themes that are discussed there and how they may relate to problems that you're dealing with in the fields of, business communication?
Yes, I did. And I also, as I was reading the book, I started thinking about things in my own life and how I had used those principles without even being aware that that's what I was doing in order to become successful and to do things like become a TV news anchor. And I didn't realize it until I read the book, but things like having a definite purpose, having definite plans, making an organized effort, having a vision. I was doing all of those things at a very young age, in my early 20s, and they actually really worked. Like, for example, I decided I wanted to be a TV news anchor, and I was working at a TV station. I got a job as an internship and then worked my way into a behind the camera, where I was running studio cameras during the newscast. When the anchors would leave, I would go sit up on the set and practice working with the teleprompter and the lights on and looking in the camera. And I got really comfortable with it, and I could clearly see myself doing that. And honestly, at that point, it wasn't any kind of an effort like law of attraction. I didn't even know what that was then. It was just something I wanted to do. And the picture became so clear in my head. I had such a clear vision of it. It became a reality. But I also developed a plan. I had a definite plan that was in alignment with my purpose. And my plan was to go out with the reporters in the morning, because I worked the evening newscast from 3 to 11:30. I went out on my own time with reporters in the morning to learn their craft, to learn how they put things together, how they interviewed people. And I did that for a very long time, like almost a year. And they saw that I was serious and helped me put together basically an audition reel, which I then took to some other TV stations and was able to get my first TV job like that as a reporter. And then I worked my way up into an anchor, and then I was always a main anchor from that point on. But it started with having a definite purpose, a clear vision in mind, and then coming up with this plan to follow. And I still live by that. I think you need a definite plan and a real clear vision, and your actions need to be in alignment with that.
It's amazing how that happens. Once you make a decision, things start to line up. When you say you developed a definite purpose, was it more of, did you actually, one of the techniques that they talk about in Napoleon Hill's book, in The Law of Success, is that he's very big on writing things down. So when you have a definite purpose, it's like you write it out and then refine it. You go back to it, you constantly look at it. You're constantly adjusting it to things that are happening in your life and situations that may have come up that change it a little bit, but it always basically stays the same, but you just have to make those adjustments. And I always wonder if that's something that you just sort of did on your own, just started writing things down, or if you maybe didn't even do that, if you just sort of had it in your mind and you sort of refined the vision within without writing it down. How did that work for you?
Well, actually, at the beginning, I did not do that. I did not write anything down. I had it pretty clear in my head. But I think it is important to write these things down. And as I continued to move on in my career, move into other careers, and started reading more books like Napoleon Hill, then I learned about the importance of actually writing things down, that it was important to write down your goals, to have a plan, to have like an ultimate goal, and then break it down into steps so you would see exactly what it would take to get to that goal. And I have done that, like at various times in my life, especially if I'm transitioning into a new career or into a new area. I think that really helps to give clarity when you've got a specific action plan and you break it down into doable steps. So it's not some vague idea that you've got in your head out there. It's actually breaking it down, just like following a roadmap. If you don't have a clear roadmap, you're not going to end up anywhere, or who knows where you're going to end up. It's creating your own roadmap and then filling in those pieces of it. And I think it's a great thing to do. I think it makes a huge difference.
Now, did you find that you used that same type of definite purpose when you wanted to switch from one career path to another?
Yes, because my bottom line purpose is to educate, train, and inspire. And that has just shown up in different ways. It's continued to evolve. That's been my guiding principle, but it's continued to evolve over the years as I've transitioned from one career into another. And I really feel like I belong now with entrepreneurs, companies, and corporations to really help them transform the way they communicate. And actually, it can change their company culture to a place where people want to be there instead of people getting into conflict or feeling like they're not cared about and productivity goes down, absenteeism goes up. I think communication is key in keeping employees engaged and excited to be there and actually transforming that company culture to a place where people are excited to come to work and to perform their jobs and to be part of that company vision.
So when I was looking at communication, I was sort of referencing the laws of success as I was looking at it and thinking about ways that the laws of success could be relevant to, healthy communication in business or personal relationships. And it just, you could almost go right down the list. You start out with the definite purpose. If you're going to communicate with somebody, there needs to be a definite purpose there. You need to know what you're trying to communicate. There's the self-confidence that would go into being able to communicate in a healthy way with somebody. If you're not confident about your own abilities, if you're not confident about, whatever it may be, it's harder to communicate with someone directly. There's, the initiative to take the initiative. If you don't understand something, like you mentioned before, ask questions. There's cooperation. So it almost feels like, communication, just, you could take anything, but in this particular instance, we're talking about communication, it seems like a microcosm. All the laws sort of fit within it. You know what I mean? You could basically correlate every single principle to the art of communication.
Yeah, I agree 100%. As I was going through the principles and looking at them, trying to think, which one of these is the best representative of how my career has gone and linking it to communication and to business. And you're right, it's almost every single one of them, you can see something in it and how it connects directly to communication and business.
So one of the other things I was curious about, how much time do you typically spend with a company evaluating the communication issues?
It depends on the situation. It depends on what the company wants. For example, some companies don't want a lot of time spent, in which case I can go in and just deliver what I think based on a few conversations, what I think would be best for them. But for example, right now I'm working with a company and it's great. They wanted a lot of input. So what I've been doing is I've actually been going over to that company and interviewing some of the lead executives and some of the employees. I'm going to be surveying all of them. I'm sitting in on their meetings. I'm listening in on their teleconferencing calls. So I'm actually spending quite a bit of time there ahead of time to see exactly how they're communicating with each other, where the potential problem areas are, where the breakdowns are occurring. And I'm getting a feel from a lot of the people as to what they think issues are with communication, like where they think we need to focus the training. And I'm in the process of putting the training together to specifically address those areas. And then after the training is over, I'm going to continue to work with them. We're going to have some group phone coaching on a weekly basis for a few months to make sure that it's not like, oh, I just come in, I do this training, and then I'm gone, and that's it. I want to make sure that they're able to incorporate the things that they're going to be learning and the communication skills and tools that they're going to take with them, and that it will actually become part of their company culture.
When you go into these companies and you do that and you're communicating with all the different people at different levels of the companies, are you finding, you mentioned before that you customize certain packages for companies, but do you find that a lot of the communication breakdowns are similar from company to company? Are there certain places where it breaks down?
Yes. Yes, there seems to be a lot of breakdown between departments and between teams. So, for example, like that NASA one I gave you, one team didn't know what the other was doing. That was a big thing, but that happens on a much smaller level on a daily basis. So, for example, maybe an IT department or team might realize that they're going to have some downtime with the server. There's going to be something they're going to need to work with, and they don't notify the sales department, or they don't notify the operations department. And then when it happens, everybody's taken by surprise, and then they don't know whether to send people home. They don't know how to deal with it. So that's something that happens frequently. You'll find that cuts across a lot of companies, that there's breakdowns between the departments and between the teams, not as much within, but those communication doors need to be really opened up where one team knows what the other is doing, because a lot of times what one team or department does has a major impact on the other or several of the others, but they don't realize it. They're not doing it to be malicious or anything like that. They're just not really aware of the impact of what they do, what they say, how they do things, how that can impact the other teams. And I see that a lot. That's a very common problem.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I mean, we've seen similar things within our company, and we've tried to structure it where departments are talking to each other, because there are, it seems that each department works well with the other people from that department.
Yes.
But then at some point, there's whether it's not quite understanding what the other department does, or how it affects the overall business, or whether it's just not wanting to be involved because you have your own things to do. But a lot of it has to do with one of the themes that I noticed on your website when I was looking through your background was conflict, and I wondered if you thought that a lot of people don't communicate well because they're afraid of conflict.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, people are afraid to speak up, and they're afraid to say what they really think. So they're not really communicating, but a lot of that is because they're afraid of conflict. And another really good example of that, unfortunately, it's NASA again, but people knew about the problems with both of those space shuttles, the Columbia and the Challenger, but they didn't speak up. And because of that, all those people died. They both crashed, and that's a common thing that happens. And with conflict, another thing about that I think people don't realize, we hear conflict and we automatically think of worst case scenarios, which frequently does happen. But conflict can actually be healthy for an organization. It can actually promote stronger relationships, better ideas, better problem solving. It can create a synergy. The key is how that conflict is directed. It cannot go down that destructive path where it turns into personal attacks, character assassination, insults, yelling, that type of thing. It needs to be channeled into more constructive means of healthy argumentation and debate to produce results. And it's actually never too late. A lot of conflict issues can be resolved, not in terms of necessarily people are going to agree if they disagree on something, but there are ways to conduct conflict and resolve conflict so people are satisfied, not necessarily changing their mind about a particular issue, but it can have positive outcomes, and that's part of what I do.
As I'm listening to all these problems that happen in businesses and communication breakdowns, it seems for me to keep circling around self-confidence, and whether that's self-confidence in your own ability, your job stability based on your performance, and these type of issues. It always seems to me, at least, to circle back to that, and people aren't wanting to maybe get into conflict because they don't feel confident about their place within the job, or they don't feel confident about their performance at a certain level of their job. So I think that's really interesting. But I guess the question is then, is it when you go into these companies, can you help people by helping them develop confidence, or is that something that they have to do it on their own?
Yes, we can help with self-confidence through certain activity and exercises that can help with that. I think one of the things with self-confidence, and it talks about it in the book, the knowledge of self, focusing on your strengths. A lot of times what I think decreases people's self-confidence, they're busy focusing on their weaknesses. They're worried about their weaknesses and what they need to do, and they're spending a lot of energy trying to correct or fix weaknesses, which is really a waste of energy. Instead, they should be focusing on their strengths, and that helps boost self-confidence, and they can make their strengths even stronger, and they can really shine in those areas and stand out and make a major contribution. And that's a much better use of energy and focus than worrying about the areas where we're not as strong and trying to fix those or make those better. I think we just have natural skills, and other skills can be developed, but the ones we're already good at, that's what we need to strengthen. And it's sort of the same way too, like choosing the career that we're going to go in and to making sure that we're in alignment with our purpose, is we want to use our natural strengths. We don't want to go off and have some other career in some other area that we aren't comfortable with or we don't know anything about. So it's the same thing. We need to focus on the areas where we're already strong, and that can really boost self-confidence.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's all kinds of research out there there was sort of like a movement. I remember picking up several books that ended up talking about just that, focusing on your strengths to develop confidence, as opposed to spending time in areas where you don't have necessarily, natural abilities or aptitudes or even, desire to want to become good at those things. Become good at those things. So I wanted to ask, when you go into the companies, what are several ways or techniques that you use to fix communication breakdowns?
Well, there's a few areas that I focus on, and one of them is the listening that I mentioned. People do not realize the degree to which they are not listening. And one of the things I challenge people to do, and I will challenge everybody who's listening to this right now, is to start noticing just in the course of your daily life, when you're at work, when you're talking to other people, or even at home with your family, notice how much of the time you're actually in your head thinking either about what you want to say or how you want to dispute what they just said or what you've got to do the next day or what you want for dinner, thinking about other things rather than actually listening to what they're saying, and the importance of focusing on that and actually bringing yourself back into the conversation by asking questions and re-engaging, because people don't feel heard. And in fact, that's why a lot of people will either start arguing, they start raising their voices, they're yelling, they're talking over top of people. It's because they feel like people aren't listening to them. They feel like people aren't hearing them. And the same thing with people who go on and on and on. I know we've all experienced that. We're talking to somebody at work and they just keep rambling on and on. We can't get away from them. It's the same thing. And I actually, at one time, did an experiment with that. This was a while ago. It was I had a coworker that was like that. And people would see her coming and they would run because they didn't want to get trapped by her. Well, I saw her this particular day and I thought, oh no, here she comes. So I dove into my office, but she followed me in there and I realized I was trapped. So she started on and on and on. And I thought, there has got to be a better way than to keep running away. I'm going to actually listen to her instead of just going into my head looking for my escape route. And I did. I started really listening to her, really like getting what she was saying and where she was coming from. And it took a while because she was still doing that rambling, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes, but it finally started sinking in. She finally started realizing that I was really listening to her. And it was really amazing. What happened was after that, when she finally wound down and stopped talking, she never did that to me again. She still did it to other people, but she didn't do that to me. So it's really important to listen to people. And another thing in the companies, and this could be connected to listening, is people don't feel valued or appreciated. In fact, there was a Gallup poll of 1 million people, and the top reason they said they left was because they didn't feel appreciated. And people leave managers, they don't leave companies. So it's really important that people feel that they are being heard, that they're involved in the decision-making process, which is another danger area. People at the top make these decisions. They affect the people at the bottom. They don't take any feedback from them, or if they do get feedback, it's more lip service. They don't really incorporate it into the decision making. And then the people don't feel like their opinions count for anything, and they leave. It can be a really frustrating type of an experience. And another one is misperceptions. We think that we know what somebody means or what they're saying. We read something into it, and that's not what they meant at all. Communication is complex, and it's something I know we've all experienced. We've said something, and the person we were talking to totally heard something else. You said one thing, they heard something else, and it was so far off base. It's like, how did they even come to that conclusion? Where did they even come up with that? So those are kind of some of the big areas that I focus on is the fact that people need to feel heard, they need to feel valued, need to have misperceptions corrected. And sometimes those things can happen when there's during a big organizational change, or other times just in daily interactions because people aren't communicating clearly. They don't know how to do it. And that's what I like to help people with.
Now, do you give the same advice in how to correct those communication issues to the CEO as you do to someone that's, a mid-level employee? I mean, does it sort of hold true for everyone throughout the company? It's always the same things, or are there different things for people to focus on at different levels?
Well, it's basically the same principles, just like the 15 laws. It's the basic same principles that work for everybody. But then for executives, it might be angled in a different way than it would be for employees. Because, for example, CEOs, they're creating the vision for the company. They have a different type of role. So even though the same techniques, the same principles are at work, they need to look at it from a slightly different context.
So I wanted to ask about your own personal habits, as it applies to the laws of success. I mean, do you have aside from, definite purpose, do you think there are like some habits that you have that you've developed over the years that really help you push forward with things and, achieve things that you want to achieve? If you could boil it down, if you felt that there were a couple that were more central.
Yes, absolutely. I think self-discipline under initiative and leadership, I think that's of key importance. You can accomplish everything with that, but so many people don't have it. And they need other people to motivate them. But self-discipline, I've used that at so many different times. So, for example, when I decided to go back to school after being a TV news anchor, I wanted to get my master's degree and then my PhD. Where I lived at the time, it was a 3-hour round trip to get that master's degree. And I did that. I did that for 2 years, got the master's degree and got my 4.0 so I could get into the PhD program of my choice. And then another time of self-discipline was when I actually was finishing up my PhD program and I was hired to teach at Cal State Fullerton. I moved out here without having my dissertation finished. And I was like thousands of miles away from UT Austin, which is where I got my PhD, away from my advisor, away from my committee members. I didn't know anybody. I had to finish collecting all this data, going to companies where I didn't know anybody. A lot of people could have fallen off, and a lot of people don't finish their dissertations if they don't finish it there at the school. But I did. I learned self-discipline, and I had to write everything on my own, and I had to go out and meet people and collect all this stuff, and I was doing everything on my own. But that takes self-discipline, and I think that's been a very important factor in my life, to self-motivate and to make sure that I stay in alignment with my vision and that I stay on purpose. That's been a really big thing. And I also think that the golden rule, I think that's really important. I think being open and honest and believing that people are basically good. I believe in humanity. And part of the golden rule, they mentioned the willingness to forgive. I think that's really important. Things happen at work and in business. We feel offended. We're angry. But I think a lot of people misunderstand forgiveness. When you forgive somebody, that doesn't mean that you're pardoning them or what they did was okay. Basically, what it means is you're letting go of your own negative feelings, because those negative feelings is not hurting the person that you're angry at. It's only hurting you. And I kind of figured that out when I was young, that's what was happening. And I think it even says that in the book. It's like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt somebody else.
Right.
Like, that doesn't work. So it's really just a matter of letting go of those negative feelings that are creating so much anger and upset in ourselves. It's not affecting the other person. So I think that's been another big thing that's really helped me. And action, that's another big one, like taking action. I think action is the bridge between our inner world, our vision, our purpose, and our outer world, the results that we actually see in our lives. You have to take action. And I think when Law of Attraction and The Secret and all of that came out, a lot of people were frustrated because they were working with vision boards or meditating and they weren't getting the results. Well, those things are nice and they're helpful, but you have to actually get out in the world and take action that supports you reaching the goals that you want to have. And you need to be determined, just like it says in the book. You've got to have that stick-to-itiveness. You can't give up. You need to just keep on going no matter what others say. I remember, for example, when I was first in TV and I wanted to become a reporter, an anchor, I was behind the cameras. There was a lot of people who were very discouraging to me. They're like, oh, you can't do that, or you don't have the background or the capabilities. You know, you have to learn to just tune that stuff out and stick to your own commitment. You know, stick to what you want and don't give up. And if you keep pursuing your path with action and hold the vision in front of you, you can do it.
Yeah. Also, when I think about that, one of the things that's interesting for me is like how all the laws fit together within themselves. I'm thinking as you're talking about self-discipline, it makes a big difference that if you've selected a definite purpose that is actually something you truly want deep down, you know what I mean? And then you have, inherent with that selection is the self-discipline because it's something that's driving you. It's like a burning passion that you have for that thing. I think a lot of people, pick a definite purpose without really looking inside themselves. And so it's interesting how if you go wrong in any one direction, like the other laws, it's like links in a chain, they kind of fall apart. It doesn't,
Yes.
They all sort of work with each other.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask about, besides the Law of Success and Think and Grow Rich, some other books that you've read that have been really important to you.
There have been so many of them.
Yeah.
The Dale Carnegie books are all good. They're all helpful. I read a lot of Wayne Dyer books. And John Maxwell. I mean, I really read. I'm looking at my bookshelf, which is a little out of my line of sight here where I can't quite see what all I've got up there. But I'm constantly reading stuff, things that I think are helpful in business. I read a lot of business books. I read a lot of self-growth or self-development books. But I think it's important to keep reading, learning, and growing, as well as to attend seminars. I love to give seminars and attend seminars. I love to teach and I love to learn.
So, Patty, we're running out of time. I want to make sure I let people know how to get in touch if they want to contact you.
My website is www.drpattymalone.com. But doctor's not spelled out, so it's actually www.drpattymalone.com. And on there, you can get my email, which is info@drpattymalone.com. But if you have any questions about communication, if you're looking for a speaker, I would love to come speak to your group or to your company. I do lunch and learns, and then, of course, I do trainings. And I've also got some free communication tools on my website, so feel free to go there. I've got a CD on there that you can download, and it's got a lot of information about communication and problem areas in companies and what you can do to help correct those. A lot of good content on there.
So, Patty, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been really informative. I really enjoyed talking to you about the different communications within business. And I think, a lot of the things you had to say about the laws are going to be, really encouraging for people. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. I've greatly enjoyed being here, and I really appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks, Patty.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye.